Hey everybody, I'm wearing my NASA hat to celebrate NASA's successful landing of the Perseverance rover on Mars. And today we're going to cover something that's super important in the process of learning Shakespeare, and that is scansion. We've graduated to sound effects. So Travis, what is scansion? Scansion, put pretty simply, is the process by which we analyze the rhythm of a line of verse. Shakespeare's pretty famous for writing in a verse form called iambic pentameter. What the heck is iambic pentameter? Well, the best way to understand it is if I break down the words for you, right? So you have two parts of the word iambic pentameter. You have the word iambic, and you have the word pentameter. Not sure if I can make these show up on the screen at the same time. Iambic simply just means made of iambs. So what is an iamb? An iamb is a two-syllable package and has the pattern unstressed, stressed. So when you look at words like unless or Macbeth, you can see they have the pattern unstressed, stressed. Now, what is pentameter? Pentameter is a line of verse consisting of 5 feet. It is a meter of 5 feet. And we know that because of the prefix penta, like in pentagon, representing the number 5. Now, there's a bunch of different kinds of meters. You can have monometer or monometer. You can have dimeter, trimeter, tetrameter, our favorite pentameter, which is also called blank verse, and hexameter, which is also called an alexandrine. So let me show you how to mark this out on a line of verse. We're going to take a look at sonnet number 18. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So let's break this down into iambic pentameter. The first thing we're going to want to do is count our syllables. So as you can see, we have one syllable, shall, I, 2, compare is 3 and 4, thee is 5, 2, 6, a 7, summer is 2 syllables, so that's 8, 9, and then day is 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Great. We have 10 syllables. So now using straight lines, we're going to separate these into 2-syllable pairs, right? So I'm going to use my red pen to do this. Again, you're going to want to use your pencil to do this, right? So I have one at the beginning. So shall I, it's a pair of syllables. Compare is 2 syllables, so that's one on its own. The 2. A sum, we're going to have to split the word sum because it's 2 syllables, and to make it fall into a 2-syllable pair, we're going to split it in half. So summer's day is our last one. There we go. So as you can see now, we have 5 pairs of 2 syllables each. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So let's now go ahead and mark the stressed and unstressed syllables. Remember, our iamb if you can read that, our iamb is unstressed and stressed. So this U right here, if I can get my camera to focus, this U marks an unstressed syllable, and this slash marks our stressed syllable, right? So let's go through and mark this entire line with our unstressed and stressed syllables. So, shall I compare the two a summer's day? Great. Shall I compare these two a summer's day? You can exaggerate the stress and unstress of each of these syllables, and you'll get something that sounds a little bit like, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So if we're looking at just the unstressed and stressed syllables of a line of iambic pentameter, it'll sound a little bit like this. Dee-dum, 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 dee-dum. Sounds a little bit like a heartbeat. There's a reason Shakespeare chose to write an iambic pentameter. It's because iambic pentameter is the closest rhythm to how we speak normally. I'm going to the shopping mall tomorrow. Let's go to Taco Bell before the show. These two sentences have the same rhythm as, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Sometimes you'll find if you count the syllables of a line of iambic pentameter, you don't quite get 10. Sometimes you'll get more than 10. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. We can see we have one extra syllable hanging around. You'll come across lines with more than 10 syllables quite a bit in Shakespeare, and there's a few ways that we can deal with these. The first way we can do this is what's called using an elision. An elision is just the process of leaving out a syllable from a word, and Shakespeare uses this quite a lot. Let's take a look at that same line, arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, for a closer look. Okay, so here is our line of verse, arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. So as you can see, we have 11 syllables here. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. Great. Now we want to shrink this down into a 5-foot line with 10 syllables. And we do have a way to do that. We're going to elide the consecutive vowel syllables in the word envious, right? So envious becomes envious. Envious. So I will mark this out and separate all of the 2-syllable pairs to show you how, what I mean. Arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon. Right? By eliding these 2 syllables in the latter part of the word envious, we can make envious into a 2-syllable word. So then if I were to scan this, arise, fair sun, and kill the envious moon, you end up with a nice, neat, regular line of iambic pentameter. So here's a pretty common list of elisions that you'll find in Shakespeare's plays. As you can see, heaven will become heaven, 7 will become 7, over will become or, and so forth. Feel free to come back to this if you need to. I have these all listed out here, although these are not the only ones you'll find in Shakespeare's text. So when talking about irregularities in Shakespeare's verse, there's one thing he likes to use a lot, and it's called the feminine ending. Feminine ending is a line of regular Shakespearean verse, so iambic pentameter, de-dum, 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 with an extra unstressed syllable at the end of the line. So it sounds like de-dum, 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 de. A feminine ending in a line can signal that a character is working something through in their brain, or they're experiencing some indecision. There's a questioning or sometimes a gentleness with how they're going about what they're saying. They're often working something out in their head by saying it out loud. And this feminine ending then bleeds into the next line of verse after. One of Shakespeare's most famous lines, to be or not to be, that is the question, has a feminine ending. To be or not to be, that is the question. I'll scan it out to show you. Right, so here's our famous Shakespearean line, to be or not to be, that is the question. To be or not to be, that is the question, right? We have 11 syllables. So to show you what a feminine ending looks like when you scan it out, to be or not to be, that is the question, right? 11 syllables here. So to be or not to be, that is the question, right? So when you see one of these and you're marking, you're going to want to go ahead, put a little F there. I usually circle mine, so that we, when we're going over the script, know that we have a feminine ending. Let's take a look at another example from Romeo and Juliet. The line, "O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo?" We're going to scan it down here. Here's our line of verse, down here at the bottom. If you've been playing along, you probably already realize there's way too many syllables in this line of verse, right? O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? We're dealing with about 14 syllables here. So, using our elision tool that we learned earlier, we are going to elide Romeo into Romeo. So, let me show you how this works. O Romeo, Romeo, where for art thou Romeo? And that'll get it to fit at least into a line with a feminine ending. So let me mark that here. So we've talked about lines with more syllables than we'd expect, but you'll come across the opposite problem too. Sometimes you'll have a line with too few syllables. Something like the line, "with bleared visages come forth to view." In this example, we only have 9 syllables, but we can make it fit 10. Let's take a look at that example. So here's our example from King Lear. So if we count these syllables, "with bleared visages come forth to view," right? So that's 9 syllables in this line. Now we want to expand this to create a 10-syllable line of iambic pentameter. So a trick we can use, Shakespeare in some of his words wants us to pronounce this ed at the end of a word as ed and not d. So in this case, bleared would become bleared. Sometimes you'll see this marked with a little accent over the E to let you know that that is how that is supposed to be pronounced. So we can then mark this out with blear, ed, viz, jes, come forth to view. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 iambs, 2 syllables each. So let me go ahead and mark this out with unstressed and stressed syllables. Viz, jes, come forth to view. As you can see, we have a regular line of iambic pentameter. So we can look at the same thing with this line from Henry IV. The same way we contracted the repetitive vowel sounds in the word envious, we can do the same thing by expanding them in this word valiant, right? So if we were to say this in normal modern American English, we would say became the accent of the valiant, right? Valiant sounds like 2 syllables. So became the accents of the valiant only gives us 9 syllables to work with, but we can expand this IANT at the end of valiant to create a 10th syllable, and we will pronounce that valiant. I'll scan it out so you can see. Became the accents of the valiant. Became the accents of the valiant. There's our normal 10-syllable line of regular iambic pentameter. Here are just a couple examples of syllables that we use to add on to lines of verse in Shakespeare's plays. As you can see, these ION and TION endings can be expanded, so imagination would become imagination, giving you an extra syllable. The other most common one is our ED endings, like we just saw, where a word like honored would become honored. So we know that there are irregularities in how Shakespeare constructed his verse, specifically deviating sometimes from iambic pentameter. In fact, there are different kinds of feet within Shakespeare's verse. Audiences in Shakespeare's time were able to pick up on rhythms, probably better than we can today. Rhythmic differences inside of lines of verse create what's called a sprung rhythm. Shakespeare's audiences, when listening to these plays, and I do mean listening, were very in tune with the rhythm of what was being spoken. They picked up very nicely on this iambic de-dum, 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 de-dum rhythm. So when that rhythm changed, the audience was able to catch on really quickly. An abrupt change to that rhythm grasped the audience's attention. Something's different about this line of verse, and it means I need to pay attention. The one you're going to come across more than any other in Shakespearean verse is what's called a trochee. A trochee is just the opposite of an iamb. So where an iamb is a 2-syllable package with the pattern unstressed, stressed, a trochee is a 2-syllable package with the pattern stressed, unstressed. Words like taco and coffee and Texas all follow this trochaic rhythmic pattern. Let's take a look at this example from A Midsummer Night's Dream. So here we can see Puck has a line, "Come hither, I am here." And he's telling Demetrius, basically, come at me, bro. Come fight me. So we can see Demetrius starts off talking, "Nay, then thou mockst me, thou shalt buy this deer." So we know this is a regular line of iambic pentameter. It has 10 syllables, and everything seems to be stressed in the right place, except right at the beginning. Right at the beginning of this line, and I'll scan this first line out for you. "Thou mockst me, thou shalt buy this deer." Right at the beginning of this line is a trochee, stressed, unstressed. "Thou mockst me, thou shalt buy this deer." The rest of that line is regular iambic pentameter. We can tell because of this stress on the word nay, he's directly answering Puck's challenge with no, absolutely not going to fall for it. "Nay, then thou mockst me, thou shalt buy this deer." You can also find trochees in the middle of lines. These are called medial trochees. It draws your attention to what's being said, often particular emphasis on a word. Let's keep continuing to scan through this short passage. "If ev or I thy face by day light see." Dun, 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 dun. "Now go thy way, faintness, constraineth me." There's another trochee in this line. I'll start scanning. "Now go thy way." The word faintness, if we were to scan it as an iamb, faintness, we would pronounce that faintness, which we know isn't right. So you know that here, faintness constraineth me. This is our medial trochee. We want to bring a lot of attention to this word faintness. In other words, Demetrius is saying, I would totally fight you, bro, but I'm too tired to do it right now. So I'm going to nap and we'll get back to it later. "Now go thy way, faintness constraineth me." Faintness constraineth me, not weakness. I'll go ahead and scan out the rest of this for you. Another example of an alternate metric foot that Shakespeare uses is what's called an anapest. An anapest is a 3-syllable foot with the pattern unstressed, unstressed, stressed. So we look at words like interrupt and entertain. So the opposite of an anapest is what's called a dactyl, like pterodactyl. Dactyl. A dactyl is a 3-syllable foot with the pattern stressed, unstressed, unstressed. Words like dangerous and Spider-Man all have this stressed, unstressed, unstressed dactylic rhythm. These 3-syllable feet are useful tools if you're trying to cram an 11-syllable line into 5 feet. Let me show you what I mean. So here's going to be our example of an anapest, right? "You made in a day, my lord, whole towns to fly." So we have 11 syllables here, but we can compress this into 5 feet. Fly, right? We can't quite have 11. But you can create an anapest here in what would be the second foot. So let me erase this. "In a day" can be our anapest. "My lord, whole towns to fly." There we go, 5 feet. So you made, remember our anapest is unstressed, unstressed, stressed. Mark that with an A. "My lord, whole towns to fly." There. Not quite regular iambic pentameter, but a 5-foot line of verse. The next kind of alternate foot we're going to talk about is what's called a spondee. A spondee is another two-syllable foot with the pattern stressed, stressed. It's kind of like caps lock. So words like bookmark and some names like Sean Boyd or Nate Jones are spondaic in rhythm. Both syllables are stressed. There's a pretty famous example of one. We'll scan it. So here's our famous example. This is Mark Antony's Friends, Romans, Countrymen speech from Julius Caesar. So let's go ahead and plot out our syllables. So friends, Romans, countrymen gets split, tree men, lend me your ears. Right? I come to bear, receive, not to praise him. Ooh, so we got a feminine ending here. Gonna mark that right away. Right, so let's scan out this first line, right? So if we were to do this, we could go friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears, and that works out fine. But we can make this first foot a spondee instead of an iamb, right? So just by accenting the first word, we can bring attention to the word friends and Romans, as if he's trying to get the crowd's attention by accenting this first word. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. And here's our feminine ending. Now, the opposite of a spondaic foot or a spondee is what's called a pyrrhic. A pyrrhic is a two-syllable foot with the pattern unstressed, unstressed. I can't think of any words in the English language that are unstressed, unstressed. But I can show you kind of how they work in verse by scanning a line of Hamlet. Let me show you what I mean. Here's our example of a pyrrhus. Now, I know, before we start, I know that there are different ways you can scan this. I'm going to scan this to create a pyrrhus in this second line, right? So let's start with scanning out the first line. With a bare bodkin who would fardels bear. Right, so what I'm going to do is, because this with a, right, to me would seem pretty unimportant, what I'm going to do is create a pyrrhus, and we'll mark that. So bare bodkin, right? So if we remember from figurative language, we have some alliteration we can play with here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a spondee in this next foot, right? The rest of this scans as regular iambic pentameter. So down here, we have marked with a P, with a bare bodkin, who would fardels bear. Bare bodkin is something I want to bring out in the text. So I'm using this pyrrhus first and a spondee in the next line. There's also a way we can emphasize words in Shakespeare's verse that aren't on a stressed syllable. There's a different stress marking we use for these. And when we do this, it's called lifting a syllable. So now that we know all this new information, right? We know what iambic pentameter is. We know that there are some irregularities we can come across in Shakespeare's lines in terms of length and in foot usage. Let's go through and scan a few longer passages to get a better idea of how this works in context. Okay, here we have our short monologue, what I chopped up from Julius Caesar. It's one of Mark Antony's. It's directly after he sees Caesar dead. And I'm going to do this in real time with you guys, so you can go through the process with me. So, oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth. That seems to be regular iambic. Oh, pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth. Yep. Pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth. Great. Off to a good start so far. that I am meek and gentle with these butcher. I think we have a feminine ending here. So I see we have an extra syllable, right? So I'll mark this out, that I am meek, gentle with these butchers, right? So we know here, just from finding this feminine ending, which I need to mark, right? We know from that feminine ending that Antony's probably wrestling with something, and it's probably seeing Caesar's dead body on the floor, right? So let's keep going. Thou art the ruins of the noblest man. That seems like regular iambic. Art the ruins of the noblest man. So I know here that there's an elision, right? We're not going to say noblest. That's too many syllables to fit into a regular line of verse. So I just elided this right here. Thou art the ruins of the noblest man. Great. That ever lived in tide of times. So we know this one's short, right? That ever lived in the tide of times. I believe that's 9. Yeah, so we need one more, right? And I can probably get one with this word lived. We can change this to livid, right? So let's see. That ever lived in the tide of times. Great. So we can change that to a regular line of iambic pentameter. That worked out okay. So we have here, woe to the hand that shed this costly blood, to the hand that shed this costly blood. Great. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a trochee here at the beginning, right? Because it seems like the word woe is pretty important in this sentence, right? To is less important. Woe is more important. The hand shed costly blood. Great. So remember, all of our important words are on stresses, and woe is pretty important here. Woe to the hand that shed this costly blood, right? Instead of woe to the hand that shed this costly blood. I want to emphasize woe, so I'm using a trochee here. Over thy wounds now do I prophesy. That seems to be regular. I think there's another trochee at the beginning. Wounds do I prophesy, right? So we don't pronounce the word over as over. It's over. So stressed, unstressed. We have another trochee here. Wounds now do I prophesy. Great. So we have a trochee here and a trochee in the line before, which works out well because we know we're getting pretty intense, right? He's casting woe over the people that killed him, and it's prophesying over Caesar's wounds, right? So we're getting intense. So let's do the next line. So which like dumb mouths do ope. This is just open, just a shorter version of that. Their rue be lips. Like dumb mouths do ope their ruby lips. That's pretty regular. To beg the voice and utterance of my tongue. So this is going to be elided, right? I'll show you what I mean. To beg the voice and ut. So instead of utterance, we're going to say utterance. So this becomes an unstressed one-syllable ending to this word. Utterance of my tongue. That works out. To beg the voice, utterance of my tongue. A curse shall light upon the limbs of men. That seems pretty regular. Upon the limbs of men. Right? We know we're getting emotional here. So remember I said things are getting pretty intense with these trochees at the beginning here. Right? Now we got our semicolon, which means we're getting even more emotional than when we started. Domestic fury and fierce civil strife. Okay. Domestic fury and fierce civil strife. So what I'm going to do in this line, right? Domestic fury And so fierce and civil are both pretty important words in this line, but I want to emphasize both of them. I'm not going to use a spondee, however. I'm just going to lift this syllable fierce, right? So this is our upside down U, right? Fierce. So I know that I need to emphasize this word, but I don't want to give it as much as I would give it a spondee, right? Full strife, right? So we make sure we have all the important words emphasized here. And let's do the last line. Shall cumber all the party. Ooh, so this is a little short. Shall cumber all the party of Italy. How are we going to handle that? We could use our dactyl to make this Italy, these last three syllables. We can use a dactyl to make this 5 feet, right? Shall come for all the party of Italy. So there's our dactyl, mark it with a D. So there's our entire scanned, shortened monologue from Julius Caesar, and I'll read it to you with hopefully the correct attention to stresses. O pardon me, thou bleeding piece of earth, that I am meek and gentle with these butchers. Thou art the ruins of the noblest man that ever lived in the tide of times. Woe to the hand that shed this costly blood over thy wounds. Now do I prophesy, which like dumb mouths do ope their ruby lips, to beg the voice and utterance of my tongue. A curse shall light upon the limbs of men, domestic fury and fierce civil strife shall cumber all the party of Italy. There you go. All right, so let's take a look at another example here. So I know this says Viola, but this is actually Olivia, right? This is from Twelfth Night. So, again, I have not looked at this before. I'm just going to do this in real time with you guys. Let's get this straightened out on the camera. And we'll see what we can get from our scansion. So let's start here. What a deal of scorn looks beautiful. That seems pretty regular. Oh, what a deal of scorn looks beautiful. Great. In the contempt of anger of his lip also seems pretty good. The contempt and anger of his lip. Yep. Contempt and anger of his lip. Murderous guilt shows not itself more soon. So I know we're going to be eliding murderous, right? Murderous guilt. Murderous guilt shows not itself more soon. And love that would seem hid, love's night is noon. That sounds pretty iambic to me. Right? Cesario by the roses of the spring. Okay, so we're going to get a little tricky here, right? So I could elide Cesario, but what I'd rather do, I think, is create an anapest, and I'll show you what I mean. Cesario by the roses of the spring. So what I'm going to do, that's correct. I'm going to use the two syllables that you do find at the end of Cesario instead of saying Cesario as one syllable. So we're going to have two unstressed and one stressed on by. So that creates an anapest, which I'm going to mark with my A. The row, a bit darker, this is of the spring. The rest of that's pretty regular. And let's keep going here. By maid hood on, her truth, and everything is pretty regular. I love thee so that all thy pride. So I'm assuming this is malgré, right? So I love thee so that malgré all thy pride. Nor wit nor reason can my passion hide. Great. So we can tell so far that Olivia is being pretty reasonable here. Her verse is pretty regular, right? Do not extort thy reasons from this clause. Extort thy reasons from this clause. For that I woo, therefore thou hast no cause. I woo, thou therefore hast no clause. Rather reason thus with reason, but rather, I'm going to scan this out, but rather reason thus with reason fet. So we have a feminine ending here. Right, so we're working something out. Love sought is good, but given unsought better. So mark out the syllables here. Love sought is good, but give we're going to go given better. Another feminine ending at the end of this. Let's see if we can fix this. So here's what I missed, right? We can elide the word given. Remember I mentioned being able to take out those medial V's, right? So like heaven becomes heaven, and given would become given, right? So it would look like that, given. But given, unsought, and there's a trochee at the end of this line then, if we do that alteration. So we're going to lift love, right? Because it's very important. Love sought is good, but given, unsought, trochee, better. And better is pronounced as a trochee always. So you can see at the beginning of this speech, our verse and our iambic pentameter is pretty regular. When we get to the word Cesario, right? Cesario is the interest of Olivia, right? Olivia is in love with Cesario. We get a little funky on Cesario here. Cesario by, right? We're pretty regular, again, all the way up until we get to here when we're about to mention love, right? Specifically, love sought. So, but rather reason thus with reason fetter, right? We're thinking, we're working something out. There's maybe a little hesitation, maybe a little bit of questioning what we're about to say, right? Then we start off with love, right? Love sought is good, but given, right? But given unsought, right? Lifting that word unsought, the sprung rhythm with a trochee. Better, again, 2 trochees in a row, which means these last 2 words are pretty important. Unsought and better. So I'll go through and just cold read the whole thing for you. Oh, what a deal of scorn looks beautiful in the contempt. Okay, so going back and reading this, I can actually see, this is why you always use a pencil, or in my case, an erasable pen. There should actually be a trochee here. At least that's what my brain wants to do when I read this. So, in the, and that makes sense because the word in is probably going to be more important than the word the. So, starting this over. Oh, what a deal of scorn looks beautiful in the contempt and anger of his lip. A murderous guilt shows not itself more soon than love that would seem hid. Love's night is noon. Cesario, by the roses of the spring, by maidhood, honor, truth, and everything, I love thee so that maugre all thy pride, nor wit nor reason can my passion hide. Do not extort thy reasons from this clause, for that I woo, thou therefore hast no cause, but rather reason thus with reason fetter. Love sought is good, but given unsought is better. But given unsought better. There we go. Hey, I hope that was informative for you. Feel free to go and find a monologue of your choosing and just scan it and see what happens. See if you can find those trochees and those feminine endings and what you're looking at, and have fun with it. Yeah. Scan on.